Welcome to Chapter 15, Speaking to Inform. What we've covered up to this point is a lot of the basic fundamentals of public speaking that will be able to be transferred to most, if not all, public speaking situations. We learned about how to communicate effectively, how to organize your thoughts, how to have main points and supported points, and then how to use an outline to come up develop all that information in a organized way, and then use that information to help our delivery in an outline. Now we are moving into how to inform, and this is specializing our skills into an informative speech. So again, we're taking all the things that we've learned and putting that to the side for a second, and now we're going to talk how to specialize with an informative speech. So let's first start off with why are informative speeches important. First, communicate information and transfer knowledge. It is something that we should be able to do, so this is what's going to help with that. Learning how to communicate our information more effectively will make us better at it. Also, knowing how to teach people is an important skill in leadership. You will have times when you have to describe a process of how something works or how you should do it, and the quality of your informative speech in that moment will determine how much work you're going to have to put in on the back end to continue to try to train this person and to show them what things they've been doing right, what things they've been doing wrong. Also, informative speaking gives valuable knowledge that will enrich people's lives. We've all taken multiple classes at this point in our lives, and depending on the quality of our listening, we may not have picked up as much as we could have. But it also speaks to the person who's informing, that we can improve and enrich people's lives with the information that we bring, and how strategic and how developed our informative speeches are. And more on a selfish note, you're going to be choosing topics that you will be very passionate about. So you're going to learn a lot about this topic by researching it so that you are giving the audience their highest quality of information. So those are why informative speeches are important. So it's a speech. So what is informative speaking? It's a speech designed to convey knowledge and understanding. It's not about proving a point. It's not about proving something right or something wrong. It is just simply to convey understanding. When developing and evaluating informative speeches, ask yourselves 3 questions. Is the information communicated accurately? Meaning, are they getting the information correct? A good way to tell this is if there are citations, frankly, because a lot of times people may think that they're communicating accurate information, but until it's cited from credible sources, that may not necessarily be the case. Also, is the information communicated clearly? This speaks to organization. Is it organized and structured in a way that the message is very clear? And is the information made meaningful and interesting to the audience? In other words, is it engaging? And this is one that we don't usually think of, because we tend to think of informative speaking as just giving information, and hopefully the audience will take it in. But we want to try to make it more engaging and meaningful and interesting for the audience so that they will be more able to take it in. Just like in a lot of communication, it's not it's not what you're saying, it's how you are saying it. And that by changing a few small things, we can talk about things that we were not able to talk about before, and have the audience actually take it in. So, when creating your speech, ask yourselves these 3 simple questions in regards to engagement. Is it new information? When texting and if you're doing an informative speech on texting and driving, saying that texting and driving is bad because you can be distracted, and then just ending it there, I'm sure that we all already knew that. So of course that wouldn't be very new. Relevant, we want to make sure that it is relevant to our experience. So if I'm talking about Legend of Zelda, Breath of the Wild, and I use that as an example for, high art, although I don't know anyone's opinions about that. For most of the audience who has not played this game, may not find it relevant at all. And is it useful? Is the information that I'm providing useful? And this means, can I take this information and will it either change my worldview, or can I use this specific information and apply it to my everyday life? And this is where some of academics can become rather challenging, because yes, all of the lessons in academics are incredibly useful, incredibly important in improving your cognitive capacity, but the case is very rarely made as to the usefulness of it. So there are 3 main goals of informative speeches. First, providing new information. So updating and revising the audience's knowledge. They may already have certain thoughts about your ideas of your topic. So you want to update and revise that audience's knowledge by providing the newest information. Also, agenda setting. And this is where we can make serious change with an informative speech. It's creating an awareness of the subject. In other words, it's putting it on the agenda of the person who's listening. There are things out there in the world that we may not be entirely cognizant of. That may not be at the top of our heads. For some, it may be, the Hong Kong riots that are still a big thing. But it could even be things that just need to be seen in a slightly different way. For example, whatever you think about it, the Black Lives Matter movement has been presented in many media sections in a very dishonest way. And by putting it on the agenda, then it puts it on to the audience that they should either find more information or listen to the information that you present. And therefore, now it is a bigger issue for them. And you can also create a positive or negative feeling. This is where we can kind of get slightly into persuasion, because if you're talking about something that, if you're informing us about something that is bad, then we should have a negative feeling, and vice versa. So there are 4 main types of informative speeches: speeches about objects, speeches about processes, speeches about events, and speeches about concepts. Let's jump right in. We start with objects. Objects are anything that's visible, tangible, or in stable form. What? I've just defined objects. Look at that. But it could also include places, structures, animals, and people. The scope of this speech should be adequate for the speech. So, for example, could you do informative speech on pizza? Probably. In the same way, you could do one about cats. In fact, I saw this very interesting TED Ed, an informative speech about how cats, the history of cats throughout human history. Very fascinating. Highly recommend. Do you think that we could do an informative speech about Teddy Roosevelt? That, I think, would be a lot more challenging because how many years did Teddy Roosevelt live? How many years was he in the public spotlight? And do we really think that we're going to be able to convert it down to a 5 to 7 minute speech? That may be quite a bit more challenging. Next, we talk about speeches about processes. A process is a systematic series of actions that results or leads to a specific result or product. This could be how something is made, how something is done, and how something works. With these, visual aids can be incredibly effective. We see this all the time with the in-flight safety demonstration. I'm sure that we've all been on a plane and that we all know how seatbelts work. However, what they do is they have a seatbelt and they click it and show how to do it. They also show the breathing mask and how to tighten that. So they run you through the process, and that has a lot more effectiveness than if they just said, here's what you should do. But it could also be about how beverage cans are made or how laws are made. Has anyone ever watched the series How It's Made? It's incredible and it's engaging, and that really speaks to how speeches about processes can be very engaging. This may also be like my quesadilla story and how I was tasked with showing the process of how to make a quesadilla, but I failed because I didn't practice with it. Next, we talk about speeches about events. Events are anything that happens or is regarded as happening. This could be the Declaration of Independence, Rosa Parks, Normandy, the storming of Normandy Beach, or even Woodstock. The scope of the speech should be adequate for the speech because an event could be the civil rights movement in America. But that lasted quite a few years. In the same way, if you did an informative speech on the Revolutionary War or World War II or most wars, frankly, there's a lot of information there, and it may not be possible for us to speak on it for 5 to 7 minutes. Doesn't mean that we can't talk about war, just means that we might want to limit our scope to certain events or parts of a war. So, this also allows us to rethink about certain events that have happened. Has anyone ever heard of Woodstock? What do we usually think of? Party, 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 perhaps? It turns out, and this information shocked me, was that it was incredibly filthy there. There were no working toilets. It was just mud at the very end of the day, at the very end of that weekend, I believe. And there were no roads to get in there. So there were just cars lined up on the road, on the closest road to that field. Interesting to think about. Next, we talk about speeches about concepts. A concept is a belief, theory, idea, notion, principle, or the like. So it's something that's cognitive. So with these, avoid technical language, and when you do have technical language, which is almost certain, then you should define the term clearly and use examples and comparisons to illustrate this concept. So A good example of this is math and science and even English and communication. We are learning concepts that will enrich our view of the world. Absolutely. But there is a lot of technical language in each and every one of these. And we take classes like these so that we can learn this information, learn this vocabulary, this new language, so that we are better able to understand it. And how do we learn this new language? Through examples, through comparisons, through definitions. Another good example, and one that we don't usually think about, is religion. Any religion has certain ideas and notions and principles of what it means to be a good person. And, I mean, a perfect example of this is how you define faith. That can, a lot of times, there are comparisons and examples used to show this information and show what that actually means. Now that we've talked about the 4 types of informative speeches, now we are going to talk about the 3 golden rules of informative speaking, and there won't be a 2 oral one. Sorry about that. So, the 3 golden rules are be thorough, don't be boring, and get organized. We start with be thorough. Careful and comprehensive discussion of your topic. There should be no unanswered questions or unclear explanations. And avoid abstractions and don't overestimate what the audience already knows. In other words, don't leave anything out. How do you know if you have left something out? Research. So the quality and the thoroughness of our research will be reflected very much so in the thoroughness of our presentation. So we want to be sure that we are careful and comprehensive. Yes, it takes work, but all things that are important and communicating ideas to an audience is incredibly important, because if someone is not thorough in how they're informing an audience and instead just communicate the first information that they see, even if it's from a credible source, what could they potentially do? They could potentially give the audience a false perspective and false knowledge, and therefore they will be less equipped to approach situations in the future. And avoiding abstractions, don't overestimate what the audience all knows. This speaks to the wonderful acronym KISS, K-I-S-S, keep it simple, stupid. Next, we talk about don't be boring. Choose the right topic for the right topic for the audience, and don't be too technical. Yes, there are going to be some technical concepts. There's going to be technical informative speeches, but try not to be too technical with it. So we focus in need to know information and need to know information. And this is the best distinguishing of this whole concept. There is some need to know information. Ask if it's needed or significant enough to spend time talking about it. In other words, it's the stuff that if I do not know this, then I do not know this topic. But we also most certainly need some need to know information. Need to know information is asking if it's something that would add interest to your speech. Let's talk about Teddy Roosevelt. So what is some of the need to know information? Some of the need to know information could potentially be that he was, oh, I don't know, a president. He was in the army. He was very, very energetic. You would need to know that information to know who Teddy Roosevelt is. Absolutely. You could also talk about, I believe it's the National Park Service, which he was the first to introduce, I believe. Then we have some need to know information. And what would be some neat to know information about Teddy Roosevelt? Well, one example could be how he is the namesake for the teddy bear. Funny story, turns out that he was hunting because he was an avid hunter, but also an environmentalist, so try to figure that one out. Anyway, they were hunting bears, but they couldn't find any bears. So his host, being a very gracious host, decided to catch a bear and trap it and then bring it over to the president and say, okay, go ahead, Mr. President, you can shoot it now. He said, well, that's not sporting. So he didn't do it. And his political rivals clasped onto this and said, oh, he is a wuss. He's a sissy for not shooting this defenseless bear. So it was actually used as a political attack, which is fascinating, but joke's on them because teddy bears are awesome. So be creative and personalize your ideas by providing some of this neat to know information, but it's also important to have that need to know information as well. And lastly, get organized. Using a strategic organizational pattern to better achieve your goals is important. There are many different types of informative speeches, so there are also ways that we can use some of the organizational patterns that we've already discussed to help with these processes. Trying to describe what something is, or maybe the event, or maybe the campus or the field, then you may want to use a spatial structure of how to get around this area. Next, you may talk in speeches of demonstration. It would be very weird for me to describe how to make a quesadilla, but start with the last steps first. Chronological would probably be the best for this. Speeches of explanation or describing how something works. This may speak to a topical, and so too would speeches of revelation or revealing a concept. So all of these are ways to get better organized with our speeches. And that concludes informative speeches. Let me know as always if you have any questions, and have a great day.